this is BioPhoenix here, and this game was by request of Action Jackson 95, so thank you very much for the request, and the one that he suggested was Panic Restaurant on the NES. And this game was developed by EIM and published by Taito, and it was released in 1992 in North America and Japan, although in Europe it came out in 94. Well, holy shit, that's like the same year that Donkey Kong Country came out. But one thing that is really interesting with the creator of this game is that it was actually created by Kenji Eno, and in case you don't know who he is, he's made games like D and Enemy Zero on the Sega Saturn. So before making some really strange survival horror games, he's made a platformer where you run around as a chef getting attacked by food. How very fascinating. So yes, it's a 2D action platformer. So first off, let's talk about the story here. So you play as a chef named Cookie. You know, wouldn't it be awesome if they made him have like a giant cookie head because, you know, he's a chef that cooks food, but he has a giant cookie head? Oh, God. Well, just be prepared that it's probably gonna get worse from here out when it comes to food puns. So, continuing right along, Cookie's restaurant has been taken over by the evil chef named O'Dove, and he kinda looks like Waluigi but with purple skin. So Cookie has to get back out there and reclaim it before he gets his ass beaten by an egg beater. So yeah, this is some pretty trippy shit, y'all. And speaking of trippy shit, look at the box art for this game, at least the North American one. Because holy potatoes, like what did they do to him? He looks like Dr. Wily from Mega Man if he just smoked up a bunch of crystal meth. And all the food enemies surrounding him look like they're all about to do some, well, you know, back in the pantry area. At least the European cover of this game actually looks representative of the game and not as nightmare fuel. So I definitely think that the PAL region got a way better cover than we did. So now let's get talking about the gameplay. So like I said, it's an action platformer, and the weapon that you start off with is a frying pan. No, not a drawing pan, a frying pan. Get it right, Brock from Pokemon. So you get to beat up enemies with a frying pan. And there's many other items that you can obtain throughout the levels, like a giant spoon, a giant fork that you can bounce on, throwing dishes, and even a giant pot that goes over your head that makes you invincible for a couple seconds. So you just gotta get to point A to point B, avoid all the enemies or destroy them all, and of course they all happen to be food items. And at the end of the stage you get to fight a giant boss, which also happens to be a huge food item. And in between stages, you get to do a bonus stage where it's basically you get to play slots, so very much like in Super Mario Bros. 2. Although in this one you get more rows to fiddle around with. But there is some bonus mini-games that you can find throughout the levels. And at first you only start off with 2 hits, but you can also find items that will gain your maximum amount of health. And there is only 6 stages throughout the game, which all take place in many different areas of the restaurant. So yeah, other than that, there's really not a whole lot to say about this game. It's a very simplistic and easy to understand action platformer. So now let's start talking about the controls, and the controls in this one are very good. So the control layout is very easy to understand. I mean, one button jumps, the other one attacks, and then just move around, pause. I mean, it's so freaking easy, it's just like bread and butter. And of course they are very responsive, but one thing that was quite a big surprise to me is that the hit detection in this game is also really good. Because just by looking at the way how he hits the enemies with the frying pan, you'd think that it would like really suck cucumbers, but thankfully it actually works really well. So I really don't have any issues when it comes with the controls. I think it works really well. And as for the game's graphics, I find them to be pretty nice, just as nice as a nice polished apple. So the game is very bright and colorful, and it also has a lot of really funny ass designs in this game. Like I said, all the enemies in this game are food related items, and a lot of them are pretty over the top looking. So all the character designs do look really good. Even Cookie himself actually looks like a pretty decent character sprite. In fact, in the Japanese version of the game, he actually looks entirely different. He actually looks like a younger version of himself. And there are some nice details within the backgrounds and such, so I really can't think of much complaints I have when it comes to the graphics in this game. I mean, this game did come out in 1992 after all, so I do suspect that it will look a lot nicer than some of like, you know, like the early days of NES games. So overall, this game is very appealing to look at, just like a nice medium rare piece of steak. Unless you like your steak rare or well done or whatever, but hey, whatever works for you. And now, as for the game's music, It has a very happy OST, which is definitely suiting for this type of game because, you know, everything in this game looks so happy while it's trying to murder you. But yeah, a lot of the music in this game is very catchy, very upbeat, and sounds just as nice as listening to your Snap, Crackle, and Pop. So it has some pretty good music that I also would consider to be one of my favorites on the NES. So now, here comes the part that might make you so depressed that you might end up wanting to cut some onions and start crying. Because now we're going to be talking about how much this game goes for if you were to buy this game. But just a fair warning is that the only way I think it would be best to get this game is if you either sold your organs to a cannibal, or if you just happen to have the budget of Gordon Ramsay. And then you can just go around and start telling everybody that they're a bunch of fucking donkeys. So anyways, so how much this game goes for about, according to what I'm seeing here, is a loose card for $599.
599 US dollars.
Like, holy shit, like, that was the same price that the PS3 launched. And then there's a complete in-box copy, which is going for about $1,050. And you know what else is funny about this? Is that there's even an instruction manual being sold for $399. Like, what in the coconuts is going on here? Even the European copy of the game is still very expensive, although not nearly as much, but it's still a lot. Like, I found a loose copy going for about $167, which I will say at the very least that $167 is definitely better than $599 US dollars. In fact, the complete in-box copies of the European copy of the game is actually about the same price as the loose copy of the North American one. Weird. And I only found one copy of the Famicom version, and that one is loose, going for $50, which is actually even better. Or if you at least want to try the game out without having to pay some of these ridiculous prices, then you know there is many different options out there. Whether it be emulating on your computer, your RetroPie, or your phone, or even on like some modded system or whatever. And of course there are reproduction carts out there, which of course you want to try to make sure you get one that looks like a pretty obvious repro. And I do believe this game is on a 150-in-1 cart, which you can get for like pretty cheap, which is very handy indeed. So yeah, getting a hold of this game is going to be a real bitch of a walnut. I don't know if that makes sense, but either way I'm pretty much done with all like the food puns, if you can even call them that. So with that being said, my overall thoughts on this game is that Panic Restaurant is a pretty good game. Like, visually it looks good, the music is really good, the gameplay is very solid. The difficulty is pretty well balanced, like it starts out really easy and then gets a little bit harder later on. But I do find that for an action platformer, this game is a little bit on the generic side, but the one thing that does keep it like from not being generic is that this game is pretty wacky and quirky when it comes to the theme and setting. Also, this game only has 6 levels, which is a little bit disappointing. I mean, they've had games before that had a lot more levels than this, and I don't know, I think there could have been a lot more they could have done with this. I'm pretty sure they probably could have fitted like 9 or 10 levels into this one card, I'm sure. But regardless of that, this is actually a pretty fun game. Now, I don't think this is like the best action platformer you'll ever play on the NES, but it still makes for a casual, good time fun platformer, where it's very simple, easy to pick up and play, and you don't need to worry about like figuring out where the fuck you're supposed to be going. And just looking at all the different enemies and all the bosses in this game makes for a pretty amusing time, so that alone is at least worth playing through. So that's all I have to say about Panic Restaurant, and well, I guess the only panic you'll be having is by looking at the prices on this game online as of right now. But if you just want to play the game itself, then I can at least say that it is a pretty enjoyable one. So with that said, that'll take us to the end of this review, and of course I gotta say thanks again for the Action Jackson 95 for giving this request to me. And of course, if there's anyone else out there that wants to request me a game to review, whether it has to be something obscure, weird, or just all around crazy, then feel free to suggest so. But keep in mind that I do work on videos ahead of time, so it might take me a while to get to it, but I will eventually do. So I'll be ending it right here and now, so thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.